Hey everybody, Jimmy Smith, post-fight breakdown, DC versus Stipe. So I got to own my picks here. I went 2-2 on the night, so broke even. Of course, the Pineda versus Burns fight was added after I did my breakdown because mine was Ankalaev and Kutalaba, which ended up getting scrapped. So only 4 of the fights that I broke down were on the card. I went 2-2. So we start at the bottom of the card. A very weird night of fights, right? A lot of weird stuff happened. I think the main event is a modern classic, great fight, but a lot of weird stuff going on, and I'll get into it in a minute. Merab Dvalishvili versus John Dodson. I picked John Dodson. I thought Dodson's boxing would be more effective, especially on the inside. This was the most boring fight on the main card by a lot. Dvalishvili had this weird style where he was just moving all over the place, even when he didn't have to. His hands were always moving. He's always skipping around. Much bigger, of course, than John Dodson. We knew that would be the issue. But John Dodson, other than these straightforward blitzes, really didn't do anything. Didn't angle much. Didn't throw a whole lot. When you're facing a bigger opponent, generally speaking, you have to give them reason to back up. You have to throw enough volume that they're not going to be in your face the whole time or going for takedowns at will. And Dodson didn't do that. So Dvalishvili pretty much had the run of the octagon to do whatever he wanted. And, got a few takedowns that were like he was picking up a child. Those were embarrassing. When he would get in and really like lift John Dodson up the way you lift up your little brother or something. Just totally grown-manned him. But John Dodson's speed advantage, not a factor. His footwork, generally pretty good, was a non-factor. His accuracy with his punches, usually pretty good, was a non-factor. So really, Dodson didn't do much. Dvalishvili easily won it, but I was disappointed in that fight, period. Even though, obviously I picked Dodson, but whether I did or not, I did or didn't, I liked Dvalishvili a lot. And just not a great fight to kick off the main card. Daniel Pineda, Herbert Burns. I obviously didn't pick this one, but great performance by Daniel Pineda. I know people who train with Herbert Burns, and they have great things to say about his ground game. Very, very technical, very sound, but Pineda, man, once he got that crucifix position, woo, it was over. Great ground and pound, real confidence on top. I think at the end of round 1, Burns realized if I don't get on top, I'm going to lose this fight. I'm not going to beat this guy from the guard. He's just too solid. His ground and pound's outstanding. So got on top briefly in round 2, looked good, and then got reversed and, crucifix position. That was all she wrote, but tenacious with that ground and pound. Tenacious with that crucifix position. For the old school fans, it reminded me a little bit of the Matt Hughes, Carlos Newton. Bang, 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 wouldn't let him out. Same thing he did to BJ Penn. Very, very solid with his ground and pound. So great stuff from Daniel Pineda. He gets a TKO in round 2. Yair Rozenstruik versus Junior dos Santos. I pick Rozenstruik to win by knockout. That's exactly how he won. Dos Santos looked good in the beginning. I mean, his strength is always his ranginess, the awkward angle of his punches, the power of his punches. He's good at beating guys from the outside. He wasn't that busy from the outside. He didn't do that much with his jab. We didn't see him sling a whole lot of right hands. Although he was doing well, Rozenstruik didn't really find a way in early in this fight. It was just that when he did, it was all over. Junior dos Santos got dropped in round 2, swarmed him, and that was the finish. Rozenstruik had better power, certainly better inside power, and just dos Santos has been through a lot of wars. Just the cane fights by themselves are going to take years off your career, let alone everything else he's been through. Obviously coming off the Ngannou knockout, stuff like that. It's just chins don't get stronger; they get weaker. And not that Rozenstruik doesn't have real power, because he does, but easily knocked down, easily finished once he was in trouble. Does dos Santos want to continue in a heavyweight division that will always have hard hitters? The thing about surviving as a heavyweight, and I'll talk a lot more about the heavyweight division in a later video, comparing Fedor and Stipe for the greatest of all time, it's always going to have guys who can hit. That's the minimum requirement to be a heavyweight. Even a heavyweight that doesn't have a ton of knockout power can still knock you out. It's just physics, okay? They're bigger, they're stronger. Once the chin goes, your ability to take a shot and read a shot goes, it's over for you in the heavyweight division. You can't survive like you can at 25, 35, 45, that don't necessarily have hard hitters. When you slow down, you're done in those divisions. But once your chin goes, you can't take a shot anymore. It's hard to be successful as a heavyweight. And I think we're seeing that point from Junior dos Santos, where he just can't take the hit like he used to, can't walk through punches like he used to, doesn't have the awareness he used to. And so he might want to call it a career. Great career, should he call it, Fantastic heavyweight, of course. Everybody knows his credentials, his physical ability. So I think he might want to call it a career after this one. But so that was the first pick of mine to go right. Marlon Vera, Sean O'Malley. O'Malley hurt his ankle at some point. I remember seeing it as I was watching it in my living room, and he rolled his ankle. And I saw it clearly. He rolled his ankle, and I went, oh, man, this is bad. But he seemed to be okay for a minute. And then he did it again, and then he falls back, and the ground and pound was all over him. Two things I want to make clear. We had discussed last week on ESPN about, will the smaller octagon make a difference? Me and my producers and my co-hosts were talking about it. And Sean O'Malley really seemed uncomfortable in the smaller octagon. As he was circling, if you notice, he was circling outside. He kept hitting the fence. You never want to do that. First thing you teach somebody, unless they have, there's something about their style, they're really hard counter approaching or something, you typically don't want someone's back to touch the fence, right? Because then it's easy to have your opponent keep you there, right? He kept angling and circling and running into the fence. And it was like he wasn't comfortable because he really respected, I think, the punching power of Marlon Vera. He respected the abilities of Marlon Vera, and he wanted to keep that distance and that range. But when he would try to do that, he would run out of real estate. He would run out of room. So I thought he didn't look comfortable. Not that he was, necessarily getting his ass kicked or anything. He just didn't seem comfortable in the smaller octagon. And once he fell down, ankle was shot, that ground and pound was wicked. Make no mistake about, his ankle hurt, and he had, he went down because his ankle hurt and the injury itself, but that ground and pound was no joke. That was the end of the fight. Somebody with a bad ankle can still protect ground and pound and stay alive and all that stuff under normal circumstances. Sean O'Malley could not. Some people are griping that the stoppage was early. You saw the shot and his eyes did this, and he went out briefly. He woke back up again. So boom, he got hit and he does this and he woke up. The referee saw that and stopped the fight. I totally respect that. Yeah, he may have woke up again when his head hit the ground, but that shot knocked him out. Now, and referee, remember, another thing that's hard to see on camera that you do see in real life all the time is referees right over them. They can see their eyes. So even a camera that's in good position right on top of him, it's hard to see the rollback. The ref can see that. And I've spoken to a lot of referees that I look at the eyes. So a guy can be physically standing up and his eyes are doing this one and they'll stop the fight. Or someone can look out, but their eyes are focused and that you can see that they're aware and they'll keep the fight going. So the referee in that position, as soon as O'Malley got hit, he seemed to go out for a sec or half a second. And the referee, I'm sure, saw his eyes go, and that's when they stopped the fight. So I thought it was a completely legit stoppage, but you're going to hear a lot about the ankle, and that's true. He did hurt his ankle. Don't let that take away from the ground and pound of Marlon Vera, because that was some brutal ground and pound, and O'Malley had no answer for it. And there's nothing positionally there that an ankle would prevent you from, at least trying to survive the ground and pound. You know what I mean? You can't blame the ground and pound knockout on the ankle. You can blame the fact that he went down on the ankle, but that was some wicked ground and pound, and you can't take that away from Marlon Vera. So, huge win for Marlon Vera. Is it a huge step back for Sean O'Malley? No. I mean, yeah, he was injured, but it's also like, yeah, you're going to lose some. That's the way it goes. So, I am not of the opinion, and I was vocal about this on SiriusXM last week on my show. UFC's not in the fight development business, right? Shabazian. A lot of people go, Shabazian shouldn't have fought Brunson, and that was way too much too soon. Hey, too bad. You only get so many softballs or so many fights before you have to take on a name guy. It's just, that's the way it goes. If you can't handle it, you can't handle it. I'm not of the opinion that UFC should bring up guys in a certain way and it's too much too soon. Hey, I'm from an era where, Frank Trigg's first fight in the UFC was Matt Hughes, okay? Anderson Silva got a title shot. His second fight, his first fight was Chris Lieben, which was no stepping stone at that time. So I'm from an era where guys got big fights pretty early. GSP's first fight in the UFC, Carl Parisian. That dude's a monster. And that was GSP's debut. So there was a time when fighters didn't get the kind of padding they get these days. They just don't. So the idea that people aren't being brought up the right way or anything like that, too much too soon for Sean O'Malley and the UFC made some kind of mistake, I disagree with that. That was his first name fight. He came up short. It's not the end of the world. He's a young guy. He'll be fine. So I don't think a huge step back for Sean O'Malley. He'll be back. But big step up for Marlon Vera. The main event, Stipe Miocic, Daniel Cormier, an instant classic, in my opinion. One of the greatest heavyweight fights I've ever seen. When we look at the lexicon of MMA, when we look at what we've done up until this point, and of course it's a young sport, we don't have many great heavyweight fights. You know what I mean? There are some, but when you look at the greatest fights of all time, that generally the heavyweight division isn't on the radar that much. The UFC's heavyweight division has never been the crown jewel of the UFC the way it is in boxing. Okay, there are times when it's been pretty bad, and there's times when Pride had a better heavyweight division. You could argue Strikeforce had a better heavyweight division than the UFC. So there aren't many like great heavyweight fights. Even, when you look at Kane versus Dos Santos, the first one was a quick knockout. Kane owned the next two. It wasn't like a competitive back and forth war. Pedro Hizzo versus Randy Couture, that was a great one. And that was back and forth. There aren't many of those like, Ali Frazier, back and forth, oh my God, who's going to win fights. This might be the greatest heavyweight fight of all time. I really believe that. It was really outstanding. So, back and forth, each guy had their moment. There were rounds that were divided where round one, I was giving it to Stipe, and then boom, DC hit him with a big shot at the end. A lot of people gave that round to DC. I still thought Stipe won it. Then in round two, I thought DC was doing very well, and then bam, Stipe finishes round on top, ground pound, almost finishes him, and you see DC like stagger into his corner. I thought, man, this might be over in round three. I really thought that. And then Stipe took it over in round three, and I was like, oh, man, he might finish him. Couldn't. And then, DC comes back in round four and has a great round. So back and forth, a ton of drama. Both guys showed skills. I don't recall feeling as tense as I felt in that fight the whole time. I felt tense the whole time because both guys can finish each other. Both guys can one shot and this could be over. Both guys were easily hittable. Both guys were landing a lot. Both guys were rocked. Both guys were in trouble. Both guys had eye pokes and all that stuff. So both guys were so vulnerable the whole time, and the stakes were so high in the trilogy. I really was tense as a fan the entire time. So I thought the right guy won. I thought Stipe won it. I know today somebody posted the media scorecards, and the vast majority thought Stipe won it. 4 media outlets, whoever they were, it didn't list who they were, thought DC won, but like 20 thought Stipe won. So I think the right guy won. I really thought Stipe won that fight. I think he is right. He's certainly the greatest heavyweight in UFC history. I'm going to make another video comparing him and Fedor and talking about legacies there, but Stipe is the greatest UFC heavyweight of all time. I thought he was going in. So great win over DC. I think DC probably should call it a career. The way he talked about it, I saw the interview this morning where he said, look, I only fight for titles. If it's not going to be a title, it's not worth me carrying on. So he kind of left the door open a little bit. He didn't seem like he's that's it, I'm done. I never trust combat sports retirements anyway. So I'm not saying that DC retired. If he did, he's had a great career and no shame at all in calling it when he did. The tragedy from his perspective, or DC fans' perspective, is always the bridesmaid. He's not the number one at 205. He's not the number one at heavy. There's no division where he's number one. Of course, won 2 belts, which is amazing. Being a double champ is a fantastic accomplishment. But in both divisions, he's widely considered the number 2 guy. So, which is weird because he's an all-time great, but he's not the greatest in any division. So that's going to be part of his legacy for sure. He was only beaten by 2 guys, but those 2 guys are 2 of the best to ever do it. So hats off to him if he calls it a career. Great stuff from him. But Stipe earned his position. Great night of fights. I'll be back for the next one, and there's some news coming up soon about my future. So stay tuned. Later, guys.